This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system.
We all know that every cannabis company is built differently and they all have their own unique set of needs, and one size does not fit all when it comes to their software solutions. Regrow is the cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system that is designed by software experts that are passionate about the cannabis industry and the success of its operators. With Regrow, you'll get all aspects of regulatory compliance built in, with the added value of workforce management, inventory, SOP management, and reporting and metrics that allow for companies to scale successfully. So if you're a cannabis company searching for a strategic business partner to help you automate your business, scale effectively, and make the supply chain work for you, you can find Regrow at regrow.io. That's regrow.io. Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Matteo Communications.
What's up, my fellow people of the plant? As you know, the cannabis industry is booming, which means the industry is becoming more and more crowded every day. So how do you effectively break through the noise? That's a loaded question, and I don't have all the answers, but I do know who does. The kick-ass PR and marketing professionals at Matteo Communications. They know how to elevate your narrative while staying compliant. Their New York and LA-based teams have the connections and powerful storytelling abilities you need to propel your brand onto the national stage. Matteo refuses to let your bold innovations and ambitious breakthroughs fall through the cracks. They'll get your company in front of your most prized audiences via their various specialties, which include PR, social media, investor relations, SEO, and more. Matteo shares your vision of normalizing cannabis for the greater good of society. They proudly partner with businesses across the industry, from investors to ancillary companies to large MSOs to local brands. No matter your business goals, Matteo is here to help. Email the team today at info@matteo.com. That's INFO @MATTIO.com, or visit their website at matteo.com to get your company the recognition it deserves.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Relevant.
While most podcasts are super informative and fun to listen to, don't you wish that the conversation wasn't always one way? Well, thanks to the Relevant app, the conversation is now open. Relevant is an open messaging network that aims to unite our cannabis community and allow us to connect with each other. You can join the audio chat communities called Vibes, and you can discover and join any vibe that you find interesting, then grab the live mic and voice your opinion freely about any topic related to the community while others join in or group chat. You could even create your own vibes for sports teams, podcasts, fan clubs, comedy, classes, or anything else that you can imagine. So find your vibe today by downloading the Relevant app, available in the App Store and Google Play. That's Relevant, RELVNT. No dead vibes, only good vibes with the Relevant app. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast, your favorite podcast that includes industry-facing conversations with the industry's leading experts that aim to educate and inform the public regarding the plant's endless benefits. My guest today is Javier Hasse. He's the CEO at Planteo and managing director at Benzinga Cannabis. We're recording. So, Javier Hasse, how are you, my man?
I am doing great. What about you?
I am doing very well. I am excited to talk with you. Before we started recording, for those listening, Javier was kind of just talking about how he kind of got started and really what put him on the path to where he is today, being a world-renowned journalist, specifically focused on the cannabis space. And I know you touch on psychedelics as well. So Javier, sorry, you're going to rehash this, but why don't you tell us, like my initial question to you was, did you kind of pitch this internally to your management and say, we need to cover cannabis, or was this something that they wanted? And you kind of said that it's just something that you were passionate about right at the beginning,
Yeah,
right?
it just did it. I mean, at first I was writing for a publication called Insider Monkey. And, I was writing a little bit about cannabis. And then I got a job at Benzinga in 2014. And I started writing about cannabis, and they were okay with it. I mean, it's not like they were thrilled, but they weren't against it, you know? So that was a lot. I was getting paid.
And that was in Argentina, right? In their
Yeah.
Argentina office. So what's the
No,
stigma
no, no,
like?
no, no. I live in Argentina. I am from Argentina. The company Benzinga is based out of Detroit. They have a big office in Detroit, and it's just like everyone is in Detroit. It's like a financial media and technology company.
So you were working remote in Argentina for
Exactly.
them.
Yeah, at first, so I got into Benzinga, in the lowest possible position as a writer. And I call my story at Benzinga from mailroom to management, sort of. Um, and it was, but at the time I was hired as the lowest paying, paid writer on staff. Um, but I was happy. I was making US dollars, live in Argentina, working my own hours,
Yeah.
saving money, traveling the world, having fun, and writing about something I was passionate about. Like when I told my friends, like, hey, dude, I'm getting paid to write about weed, they were like, are you kidding? Like, get up for real. And
It
I'm
sounds
not
like a
writing
dream
about
for
weed.
like a young guy, or gal,
I was I was 24.
Yeah.
Like I went to public schools. So suddenly, my friends are going, dude, what is this about? You know, um, and that kind of snowballed
Well,
and turned into
and
a very
and you
big business.
mentioned, I mean, you mentioned also that you were getting calls like, "Hey, come to Jamaica, come here." So at the age of like 24, you're just getting called to go not only cover these stories in different countries, but
I
probably
mean, that
even
arrived a little bit later. It started
okay.
around like 2017, probably, like the nonstop travel, really.
Got you. Okay, okay, yeah. So first it was just covering, and you were getting paid well for being a young professional, and it was a niche subject.
Indeed. Yeah, and it turned into a big business, at Benzinga that, we syndicate to very big media outlets like Yahoo, MSN, CNN, MarketWatch, Morningstar, Fox Business. So people were really seeing our stories or content that led to other publications like, I don't know, High Times or CNBC reaching out and offering to write some content. And then, in 2017, I got a book offer. I wrote a book called Start Your Own Cannabis Business. By the time I came back to Benzinga, we wanted to create a big news desk where we had writers and editors focused solely on cannabis. We started doing events and offering financial services. Now it's a massive business for us. About 70 people at the company work on cannabis related initiatives, either part or full time. And from that also, came the idea. I had an idea to create a Spanish language media outlet with some friends called El Planteo. And again, I just went to my boss and said, hey, I have this company I want to start. Would you fund it? And they did. They said, like, just don't quit. Here's
Wow.
money. How much do you need? It was very little money, to be fair, right? It's like things are cheap here and we're bootstrapping,
Sure.
but it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, that just kind of shows that there was support, you know what I mean, for what you want to do. And then the fact that he said, but you can't leave here, because that obviously shows that you're doing a great job. Um, so that's exciting. So what, I guess to kick off this question, there's so much I know that you cover when it comes to the cannabis industry, everything from international markets, business, finance, media, communications. Um, so I have a lot of things that I want to cover. So I guess we'll just start randomly somewhere, right? And one thing is the efficacy studies and reports that are worth noting that maybe you've come across or you've wrote about. And I want to bring that up because as I've mentioned on my podcast before, that there's been, as of recent, a lot of ridiculous false claims with no data to back up these false claims, particularly from politicians and other people. So, Javier, what are some efficacy report studies that you've come across, that you think are significant and that people should be aware of?
I mean, to start with, I am not a scientific reporter.
Right.
Just to clarify that, I don't want to be butchering science. I do try and understand research reports and studies and peer-reviewed studies, especially, and the process to get a drug approved, and kind of explain it in plain language. It's not my main area of expertise. We are seeing a lot of reports come up all the time, right? Especially because up to a few years ago, we had mostly what we call anecdotal evidence, right, for the benefits of cannabis, right? We knew it worked because we tried it and we felt the effects, but we had no actual scientific evidence to prove it because of the scientific process or method is pretty rigorous and has a lot of specific steps and ways to do things and ways to control for things and right.
Hmm.
And in recent years, we've seen a lot of that, right, emerge from very prestigious institutions. I know you're from New Mexico. The University of New Mexico is has conducted very cool studies on cannabis. They did one recently on stress and another one on pain. One I found very interesting this week is a small study out of Harvard that showed the real world effects of cannabis on chronic pain. Um, and one of the things that they highlighted was that patient usage of opioids dropped by 13 and 23% after, on average, after 3 to 6 months of medical cannabis treatment, for instance.
Wow.
Um,
That was one thing that I was also going to call out, but it's also another indicator of a drop in opioid related deaths. And one study, I couldn't remember the source that I saw it from, but they said that they were seeing a drop in those deaths due to states that were adult use, that had come
yeah.
online with legal cannabis. So it's interesting, right?
Again, that correlation has been studied. From what I've seen, we haven't been able to establish full causality, right?
Sure.
So we can see this happen and then this happen, but we cannot 100% assure this is happening because this other thing happening, and we're talking about a reduction in opioid deaths and legalization. But we have seen very strong links between them.
Totally.
However, again, scientific studies, even it's when it's social sciences or economic studies or whatever. In this case, right? They're mostly they're not scientific studies in the sense that they're in a controlled environment. They're more statistical analyses, and those take several years and very large populations to infer a clear causality. Like this, like legalization generates a drop in um in opioid deaths, but everything seems to suggest that is the direction things move in when you legalize.
Right. And that's a really good point that you brought up. And that's another point that Stuart Tomp, the VP of CV Sciences, brought up as well. And that is like these efficacy reports take so much time, and time hasn't happened yet, right? So like we're in this awkward period of like, because just to get certified for these tests and I'm butchering the different names of the process, but the different rigorous approvals that you need to go through, all of that study time, that window, it takes years. It takes 2 to 3 to
Oh
five
yeah.
years, right? I mean,
Yeah, and that is, as you say, like one thing is an efficacy report, and a completely different thing is a whole clinical trial, right? Uh, which proves efficacy, efficaciousness, safety. Has four phases. You have a control groups, and you have placebo, and you have like the double blind kind of study, right? It's a longer process, even. That could take up to 10 years.
right, right. Yeah. So really, I mean, what I think is, in my opinion, the most kind of valuable research that we could do is just that testimonial data, right? Someone who has tried certain medications or other things for so long and then switched to cannabinoid therapy, where in states, it's either medical or for recreational, and then just kind of hearing from them firsthand.
I mean, that helps a lot with public perception, but as you say, it's not something companies can legally use for
Right.
health claims, and it's not something regulators can take into account when regulating, right? So many times, advocates, we go to Congress or whatever, and we say like, "Hey, haven't you seen this video? Haven't you seen, Sanjay Gupta's weed?" And it's like, "Yeah, we have. It's awesome. We need the actual science. We cannot make a decision based on isolated cases, no matter how many they are. It's just, we haven't controlled yet."
Right.
And I'm
And
like, that is not my personal position. Of course, I think
sure.
cannabis is awesome and should be legal everywhere.
Sure.
But
No, your
I
your point
believe
your
that,
point's taken, because that's the legal framework of how it works, right? They have to have that scientific data to then proceed further with allowing it to be accessible to more people. I think that the benefit of those stories is just the momentum buildup, right? Because whether we see the federal government move before the states, we're seeing the states move like domino effect, and that's because
yeah.
of testimonials, tax revenue generation for the local governments, and all I'm saying is basically we'll take any wins we can get. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like,
yeah, I am
yeah,
of that school of thought, right? Like
yeah,
last week we had this piece of news this activist called Walden Angelos. He spent 16 years in jail for cannabis. He came out, he created this project called the Project Mission Green, now called Project Walden. And he formed this sort of partnership with several other institutions, including affiliates of Charles Koch, the billionaire, right wing billionaire. And I wrote a brief story about it, just news like this happened, now we have like this ultra, conservative supporting cannabis in
Yeah.
some shape way or form. This is progress to me. This has to be a bipartisan initiative. We want cannabis
Yes.
legalized. I don't care about ideology when it comes to legalizing cannabis, because all I care about is people having their medicine as soon as possible. And people were pissed, like, oh my God, how can you support this guy? I'm not supporting it, but I do celebrate this. Same like when John Boehner, right? When he turned, his and changed his mind. And
Right.
people were like, oh, Boehner, now he's on board for the money. And I'm like, I don't care why he's on board. I mean, weren't we as a movement trying to change hearts and minds? We
Yes.
made it, we succeeded. Now it's like, oh, now you're pissed.
Right. Like we can't, beggars can't be choosers at this point. Like, and I can't think of another way to say that, but I love your outlook on
I
that.
mean,
It's like news
that
is
it's like,
news. Yeah.
even like ideology wise, like I don't support these people, right?
Sure.
I lean left wing, but
Right.
still, it even beyond like the support that we need and we can get. There's also something like just human and humane about the approach I try to take, and it's like even the most conservative right wing ultra Republican deserves healthcare, right? And
Mm-hmm.
deserves his or her or their family to be able to access this healthcare product.
Right. And that's why I think that the cannabis industry is so uniquely positioned, because while it is highly politicized, or it has been highly politicized for so many years on both the right and left side, the positions that they've taken, the masses are seeing the benefit of it, whether they consume it themselves or their friends do, or they just understand the economic, environmental, and medicinal benefits of it. So it's not becoming a political issue. It's more of a human rights issue, really. Access to the plant. Everyone should be able to access the plant if they want it. You
And
know.
I think the issue of legalization also appeals to very different demographics from very different sides. That's one of the most interesting things to me. The fact that legalization implies, economic benefit, but also freedom from the state, and also, like restorative justice, and also like gender,
Yes.
like, yeah, I mean, and a bunch of things, and just different people, different arguments appeal to different people, right? For libertarians, maybe legalizing cannabis is all about keeping the state out of someone's affairs. For
Mm-hmm.
a left leaning person, it's maybe about righting the wrongs of the war on drugs, or creating a new industry where women boast a higher participation in the C-suite or executive positions, right? So that's interesting, right? It's like it appeals to everyone, and some people like, yeah, maybe no, like whatever, your mom or your dad, they don't care about this, politics or the economy or whatever, but they care about like the human aspect of it, and then seeing a kid with epilepsy, being medicated with cannabis, that appeals to them, right?
Right.
But it's so far reaching.
It is so far reaching, and even if you don't put them in those boxes, like the super left wing, the super right wing, and their reasons of doing it, maybe there's a super ultra conservative politician that likes to smoke a joint after his long day instead of having a beer, or and that's to your point of how it just intersects with so many people's lives, right? Or maybe there's some people that are future thinking, and they're saying, what, we can make a lot of material goods out of this crop. Let's go back to history and what we kind of did in the past when we had hemp steeds at our house, at our in our lots and whatnot. So
Yeah.
it's just fascinating, and that's why you're so uniquely positioned to cover it all, man. And when we talk about the opposition of cannabis, which has played out for so long, I recently read an article about how big pharma is leading the lobbying industries in total spending last year in 2020 Do you think there's any correlation between that big pharma lobbying spend and efforts to continue cannabis prohibition?
I mean, one can only assume. There's no telling for sure. There's been reports, over the years of this being true. uh, I cannot confirm or deny. I mean, it does make sense that industries like pharma, the prison industry, the tobacco industry, the alcohol industry, the textiles industry, right? The oil industry. They're worried about cannabis and hemp legalization and their expansion. Um, but I mean, we're also seeing progress. So many of these uh, the companies in these industries are starting to realize that progress is kind of unavoidable, and starting to invest, right? Like a few weeks ago, we saw British American Tobacco, one of the largest tobacco companies in the world, acquire a 19.9 stake in Organigram, a Canadian producer. We saw several years ago alcohol companies invest.
Hmm.
Big pharma is also, invested or working in cannabis, even if silently. A few months ago, GW Pharmaceuticals was acquired by Jazz Pharmaceuticals, which is also very like much traditional pharma.
Right.
Even companies in Mexico, like traditional pharma companies in Mexico or Argentina, are already looking uh, at cannabis products as well. So
It's
it's
already
only
happening. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
they're
they are coming to terms with, like, okay, we we held this back as much as we could. Now it's time.
right, right. No, that makes total sense. And like you said, we've already kind of start to see that happen as well, and we're only going to continue to see it happen more and more. And even I read an article from Benzinga Cannabis where it was talking about Uber's CEO is bullish on entering the cannabis space with delivery options. So it just seems like more and more major
But you
large
see a lot of
companies.
that hedging, right? Same as pharma, same as hedge funds, all that. Like all those people are just waiting for cannabis to go federally legal before making any plays, right? So that's part of what Uber CEO said is like, yeah, we're interested in cannabis. We do think cannabis consumers are cool, but we'll wait till legalization comes. However, what was interesting about that specific news item, they also talked to, or so Uber already works with this company in the cannabis industry called Philo, Fyllo, to create like a marketing campaign. And Travis Freeman, who's the global head of media at Uber, said that the cannabis consumer, they have looked into the cannabis consumer and found out the cannabis consumer is younger than the normal consumer, has more disposable income, they're busier, they're working all the time, exercising, and also have a larger attention span for ads. So I don't know, like all these little things that may seem innocuous are pretty big. Coming from a massive company like them saying like, "Hey, we really do like cannabis consumers. We like the cannabis market. We're just waiting till it goes fairly legal."
Do you really think that they're going to wait until it goes federally legal though? Like, I mean, because we really don't know when that'll play out, right? And we're seeing that the states are adopting more and they're becoming more open to the
I mean,
idea. So like
they
you don't think that they'd make the switch and maybe operate in states where it is adult use?
Not really. I mean, for several reasons. First and foremost, they already have profitable business units, and they said they will continue to focus on those until new opportunities arise from legalization.
What if a competitor switches like Lyft and does it?
I mean, here's the other thing. For either Uber or Lyft, they trade on major U.S. exchanges, the New York Stock Exchange, the Nasdaq, and in this case, the Nasdaq. Neither one of them allows for companies touching the plant to trade on their exchanges. This
That
means that if
yeah,
they're transporting weed, suddenly they're no longer in compliance with federal laws, and
right.
therefore they could they could and probably potentially very likely would lose their listing on the Nasdaq,
That makes
and they
sense.
don't want that. Like, yeah, it does
Right.
not make any sense
Right.
to downgrade your stock or go to Canada, to move a little weed. They whenever they want to come in, they just have the money to go out and acquire like Ease or Dutchy or driven deliveries or whatever.
Right. So that makes sense. So in that example, do you think that's why major financial cable networks like CNBC don't report on MSOs as much as they do the Canadian companies, simply because it's legal in Canada and not here?
I mean, a little bit, but not really. I wouldn't say so. They do report on MSOs. They report more on Canadian stocks. More, I think, one, because they are more comfortable with them and they've known them for a longer time. And two, because as we were saying earlier, Canadian companies that are not touching the plant in the US and are operating in federally legal markets like Canada are in compliance, and they can list on the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange. And, for major financial media, these stocks trading on major exchanges are always more interesting. They're more attractive. They're safer. They have higher disclosure requirements. So I think it stems from that particularly more than the interest itself or federal illegality. There's no like real legal implications for media covering this, right? Um, but I don't know, like it is the reason why institutional capital is staying out, right? Why
Mm-hmm.
pension funds cannot invest in cannabis, why hedge funds are mostly not investing in cannabis, why we aren't really seeing big pharma make massive investments, right?
Right. And we won't really see that happen until the first step of like safe banking passes, right? Where um, it's no longer a cash business, and these operators can actually start to bank with private institutions.
Yeah, that is a very, like very first step, like very early first step too. Like it will change a lot for the industry. I don't know how much it will change things in investors' eyes or in, the big boys' conception.
Right. Right. But it is that first step, right? What do you think about the rise of celebrity branded products? Um, are we just going to see it be more regional for now due to the federal legalization laws, or will we see to more celebrity branded products kind of be scattered throughout the states where it is adult use?
A little bit of all, right? Like you have celebrity brands that are cannabis only. There are celebrity brands that are CBD focused, right? So, I recently spoke to Magic Johnson and Jane Fonda, and what they're endorsing is a CBD product. It's sold everywhere. Burner, has stores around the country and has gone international because not only does he sell cannabis, but he also sells, all these like ancillary products and rolling papers and clothing and all that. Sorry. So yeah, I mean, celebrity brands are pretty cool in general. I think they're cool. They drive a little bit of a price premium, but
Well,
I don't know.
and
I think, yeah, we'll continue to see them pop up.
yeah, I think I just heard, you
Obviously, on these
remember
specific
Steve
markets.
Urkel? I
I saw it yesterday.
Yeah, Urkel, Purple Urkel, JL White, I think is his name. He played Urkel back in the day, and he came out with his new line, I guess. So it just seems like it's happening quite a bit, you know.
Oh yeah, like every
Um,
week I get a couple, at least two or three new emails saying, "Hey, like this celebrity is getting into the industry. This celebrity is getting into the industry." Some are more committed than others. Some are really,
sure.
getting involved in the product, developing the line, etc. Others are just, like just lending their name to someone else, getting an endorsement check, and that's it.
Right,
But
right.
for some reason, celebrities do seem to want to be more involved in cannabis than they are in other ventures that they're endorsing randomly because they love weed and they love
Right.
good weed.
Right, and it seems like it's similar to like the alcohol industry. You got a lot of musicians and celebrities that have their own private label of liquors, like vodkas or tequilas, and so it's similar in that way also.
But I mean, for me, and this is like based on completely nothing but intuition and assumptions. But to me, it's more rare for people to really know vodka or gin, right? And be able to differentiate among great gin and amazing gin, and just like finding for cannabis, like, for some reason, I think people have developed more of a taste, and it's easier to say like, oh, I like this cannabis, I don't like this cannabis, right?
I
Like
I
this taste.
totally I totally disagree just because of like where I'm at in Texas. It's so like not prevalent. You know what I'm saying? So um when people can even just get their hands on good cannabis, they're like, oh, this is great. They're not in a position where it's like, but I could see a mature market for sure, right? Like
Oh yeah, I mean, celebrity
yeah.
brands are not for Texas either, right?
Right.
Like
Exactly.
it's not. I mean, at the for the time being, at the very least, they're not focused on Texas, which is a medical market.
Or hemp.
Celebrity brands,
Hemp celebrity brands could be though.
true.
Yes. I have a question. So speaking of celebrity brands, the parent company is a Goliath in California. And recently, I think as of what, this week, yesterday or the day before, Mercer Park and Glasshouse Group announced that they're going to form the largest cannabis business in California. So talk to me a little bit about that news and what that means in terms of competition for the parent company now.
Uh, I mean, I think there's space for both in the market. They will both be very major players for sure. The parent company has, Jay Z and the Santana brand and the Marley brand. Glass House has this massive reputation. They have the Bell Thorne brand. So for context, we're talking about a Glass House Group. They're going public via a $567 million SPAC deal. Um, and that's an interesting thing, about this transaction, or SPACs, right? SPACs, or special purpose acquisition corporations, are a new trend in cannabis, a new way to finance companies and take them public, right? So it's the evolution of what used to be called a blank check company, right?
Right.
So basically, they create this company that is
It's a
created with the sole purpose of finding an acquisition target and acquiring it. But a very interesting transaction, very, very like high price tag. That same week, Canopy Growth also spent over $300 million to acquire the Supreme Cannabis Company. And it's just it seems part of a trend where capital is really returning to the industry, and valuations seem to be a little bit more inflated like they used to be a couple of years ago, which is both good and concerning.
right. And it seems like the SPAC method is kind of the more preferred method for cannabis. I think I even saw, what was it, the Series Group and Wrigley for Parallel. Didn't they go through a SPAC also for
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, a bunch of them. Like there were a bunch of transactions at Benzinga. We did publish an article a few months ago with our good friends at Viridian Capital Advisors, and they argue SPACs saved the cannabis industry in 2020.
Wow.
Yeah, and for good reason. I mean, let me see if I can find it, because it's about like how much of the capital invested into cannabis actually came from SPACs.
That's a really good question. Yeah, good answer to know.
If I can find
And
it.
while you're looking, so like the I guess the incentive to go the SPAC route is just because it's easier entry. It's less red tape when it comes to like actually listing and going through a traditional IPO.
It's yeah, it's in some ways easier. Of course, like setting up the SPAC itself is a little bit tougher, but then the go public transaction is made easier, and just financing the company, suddenly it's a lot of money coming in at once instead of going out to raise from a bunch of different funds, as
Right.
most companies are doing, right?
Right. Clever Leaves, that's another one that comes to mind. They were also a SPAC.
Yeah, and the SPAC transaction that took them to
SPAC.
Nasdaq as well, right?
Yep.
As you said, like then there's Bespoke Financial, Subversive Capital. Um, there's like quite a few SPACs out there, that are funded and ready to invest or invested recently.
So the quote was that SPAC saved the cannabis industry in terms of just an increase of capital in 2020.
Yeah, and the
Wow.
capital flowing this year as
Capital
well.
flowing. Yeah.
Like most of the largest deals were made via SPACs, except for these very big non-cannabis industry investments, like the $7 billion acquisition of GW, right?
Right. Have you heard of any other upcoming SPACs that are worth noting or following?
There's always news about that going around. Let me see what can be shared and what can't.
Look in
But yeah, I mean, the
the
ones you were mentioning
non-confident.
are pretty good examples.
Yes.
Oh
Well,
yeah,
I
there's the Israeli company, Univo Candoc. Yeah,
Canada.
Candoc is also going public through a SPAC deal.
Okay.
Subversive Capital is the one.
I
So, but
think
yeah,
I think
just a lot of that going on.
nice, nice.
Super interesting.
Well, hey, let's switch gears and talk about international cannabis markets. I know that you are from and reside in Argentina. We're here in the U.S. We hear about Mexico about to legalize the country. So, give us a breakdown of the international markets and kind of how you see each country kind of playing a part in this global market
Yeah, for
when we
sure.
get to that point.
I mean, Mexico, as you mentioned, is a very interesting market to keep an eye on. They're very, very, very close to finalizing their adult use legalization. That would potentially convert them in the largest federally legal market for cannabis in the world. Uh, a lot of expectation there, a lot of excitement. We still have to see when and how the law is implemented. The big player in Latin America right now, and for last maybe 3 years, has been Colombia. About $600 million in investment money from foreign investment money flowed into Colombia since they established their medical cannabis market in 2017. However, they have not really lived up to expectations, especially for two main reasons. One, the local market did not develop at all, and two, the export market is progressing a lot, much slower than anticipated. It's really hard to export. Very limited products and companies can be, very limited amounts of products and specific types of products can be exported. Very few companies have the export licenses. Then there's Uruguay, which is the country, the first country that federally legalized adult use cannabis, but it's like 3.5 million people. So again, small market that is not really focused, at least internally, on generating really like profits. Of course it is, but it's not so focused on financial side of it. Now again, they're starting to export a little bit of dried flower, CBD products, but very slow. There's
when
very interesting.
when did they go legal? It's funny because I had to delete a tweet because I was like, Mexico is going to become the second country to go legal, and then I had to make sure that I was right, and I looked it up, and Uruguay was the first. What year was that?
I think it was 2013.
2013. Okay. So it was them, and then Canada in what, 2016 is it when
Yeah.
Canada? Okay. Got you.
So, but I mean, the way Uruguay legalized is interesting because they just had this president who was awesome. He still is awesome. He's no longer the president though, Pepe Mujica, and he just went like, "Hey, I don't want my people going to jail for this." He wasn't
Wow.
really thinking about the economic implications or medical cannabis really. He just
Sure.
was like, dude, let's just regulate this. Let's get this
Wow.
over.
He's just like, it's a plant. This is wrong. We need to not lock
Yeah.
people up for this. Wow,
and
that
and,
is
and
awesome.
that was a good start. Then they built on that, right? Like they had a set of rules and regulations and laws that was okay but pretty imperfect at first. Then they started improving it to expand access, to provide different types of access. At first they had only two state approved producers who grew weed outside as if it were wheat, right? Like just randomly, and then it was sold at pharmacies for like $1 a gram. And each company had 50% of the market, and that was it. And it kind of sucked. And then they had, like these cannabis clubs. You can become a member and get your cannabis from this better grower. But it's all only for local people who are registered in at a specific registry.
Gotcha.
But after that, all these other complexities started to emerge. Like, hey, what about medical cannabis? Okay, yeah, we need medical cannabis. Okay, so how do we produce the products? Okay, you have these producers, the ones selling to pharmacies, and the people were like, yeah, but this cannabis is not good enough to produce a distillate or an extraction or this kind of product. So they're like, okay, like we now to come up with micro licenses for other people who will produce cannabis to then sell to processors to make medical cannabis products. And these people cannot sell to retail customers. They can only sell to other licensed producers or processors. But they started improving the system, right? And that's how it's kind of being done around the world. People see cannabis legalized, and as soon as the first set of regulations is out, people are complaining like, "Oh, this isn't perfect." It's like, yeah, of course, it's imperfect. It's like it's the first time we're doing it.
Right.
We're trying to
And
figure it out.
right. And you're not gonna make everybody happy either. So there's that also. There's always gonna be someone or some group that's gonna be upset with the legislation. But it's funny that how you break it down like that, because it literally sounds like Uruguay like did the right thing at first by not incarcerating people, and then like you said, just like building a startup within a country, like a market that they literally need to piece together one by one ad hoc in real time. So
Yeah.
is it like, so that was in 2013. Fast forward, we're in 2021. Like how far along are they in that growing process? Have they established a medical program yet? Do they
Yeah,
have
yeah. Now they have like adult use and medical sales. Everything that relates to the program for local people seems pretty much in place. Now they're looking at exports, and that's like the new thing, right? They are trying to figure out what's the best framework to incentivize the creation of new enterprises and the growth of these companies and the exports. So far only a few companies have been able to export, and it's through special permits from the government and sort of like bilateral agreements, right? So like Switzerland will take the exports that Uruguay wants to send, but it's only dried flower. So there's a lot of these complexities, but they're getting there, right? And they're building, and it's sort of a testing ground. A very small country with a very progressive, and forward-thinking population. Um, and I think also politicians and policymakers are pretty forward-thinking.
right?
So it's an interesting, like experiment to keep an eye on. Uh, but that's that. And beyond Latin America, there are several other interesting markets. Of course, Europe is often overlooked, but it's getting, it's becoming a really big market.
Germany, I
Curaleaf
know,
recently,
right?
yeah, Germany
Germany.
right now is like, yeah, 80% of all medical cannabis sales in Europe happen in Germany. But that is poised to change. And I was saying, Curaleaf, U.S. operator, recently acquired EMAC Life Sciences for like $310 million, and this EMAC is a big company in Europe. So people are starting to really identify the value of the European market. Also, a lot of countries in Africa, like South Africa, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, Malawi, have their own programs. Thailand has an interesting program. China right now is the largest grower of hemp. We'll see what happens with them. Most of the hemp grown in China is used for textiles and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And there is chatter about China potentially banning CBD products for beauty.
Really?
Um, yeah, so that
Why
is
is
something
that?
that also
I wonder what the reasoning
it's
for is for that.
who knows.
Yeah.
I mean, the Chinese government is hard to understand. It's not like we're there and can understand the rationality, how they think, how it works.
Well, I no, of course.
Um,
The reason I say that though is because I mean I've had guests on like Dr. Kim, and she talks about how cannabinoid medicine and therapeutics have been part of the Chinese culture for like thousands of years. So it just surprises me that they would go away from that type of that product. You know what I mean? I don't know. But you're right. We can't get in the
Yeah.
heads of the
I mean,
leaders.
it's for CBD cosmetics though, right? And we know like the cosmetics category is not very well regulated and entails like includes a bunch of stuff, right? You can make a very large wide array of products and call them cosmetics and not have to abide to the same, rigor of regulations
Right.
as medical or therapeutic products.
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm just checking out and seeing if there's something else, in relation to this that.
Oh, and I hear, of course, Israel is like a pioneer when it comes to actual research and peer review studies and human trials for cannabinoid therapeutics, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And now, I mean, Israel in general has had a very long history of researching cannabis even before everyone else was doing it. Before it was a hot topic. Famous case of Dr. Mehulam, who is called the father of cannabinoids or cannabinoid research or cannabinoid science or THC or what he was the one who kind of created this sort of categorization for THC, CBD, and other cannabinoids. And now we're also seeing companies starting to take off, right? First, for the last until maybe like a year ago, most companies were relatively small, focused in Israel, maybe a little bit in Europe. Now we're seeing, for instance, as I mentioned, I Am Cannabis is now traded on the Nasdaq, right?
Mhm.
There's this other company you just mentioned going public through a SPAC deal, and a massive SPAC deal, by the way. And there are smaller operators generating all kinds of technologies that are really cool and being, exported to the rest of the world. Um, Israel is kind of the Silicon Valley of the Middle East, and because they have been so cannabis forward, or at least cannabis friendly, a lot of innovation in terms of cannabis related technology and agricultural technology has come out of Israel.
Wow. Yeah, they seem like they're just very mature in what they're doing and what they're learning about the plant. I think it even dates back to what the early 90s is when they kind of started these programs. I could be wrong, maybe it's even before that, but uh they are definitely a country to watch in terms of the efficacy of the plant. Switching
Yeah.
gears, what have you heard? Okay, so this is kind of a fun topic. We hear a lot about NFTs, right? And the emergence of NFTs. What are you seeing in the cannabis NFT space? I think the only thing that I've read is there were collectible cards that
Yeah.
had different strains that were up for purchase.
Yeah,
Like,
I didn't
yeah,
go into that one. It's just, for fun. I mean, so far I've seen a few things. As you mentioned, one of them is this collectible card collection launched by Merida Capital and Califari. Califari is a cannabis art company, and they release these collectible cards that seek to provide consumers ownership over their favorite strains, whatever that means. That's cool. It's a fun, little it's something. I mean, you can own an NFT. I'm not sure I completely fully I understand how NFTs work, why they make sense. I'm not sure I fully understand why you want to own an NFT, but who knows?
right.
And before that, a few weeks before that, a company called Peaks sold a bag of weed NFT, and whomever bought it got the virtual bag of weed. If you're in California and I think Oregon, and you were the one who made the highest bid, you would get an actual bag of weed. But if not, they just they just auctioned an NFT for a bag of weed.
Wow. Do you know how much it went for?
Last I checked, was mid process and they were like at $70, but
Okay.
I'm
So not
you can
like some ridiculous prices like you see the Instagram graphic designers, what is it, Beetle Crap, one of his went for like 69 million or something like that. So the cannabis art's not quite up there yet, but it exists. That's what I think is kind of cool, that cannabis is playing in that space, which is
yeah,
is
and
pretty
I,
awesome.
I'm hearing about several other initiatives, but they haven't been announced yet. So I can like break embargoes or share news before the companies decide to. But just stay tuned. I will be sharing more on this. Um,
Awesome.
just for clarity, it's not like I'm extremely bullish in cannabis and NFTs. I just think it's something trendy. People need to know about it, or like would like to know about it. In no way, shape, or form is this a sound financial recommendation to go buy NFTs. I have no idea what the future holds for them.
I love you're on point with the disclaimers, man. I love it. You have to
Oh,
be
it's
though. I get it, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Huh?
because it's easy to get excited about cannabis.
So when you
To
write
say
about
it's awesome.
when you write about topics, do people automatically assume that you're endorsing that topic?
Sometimes, I mean, people don't, fail to differentiate reporting from endorsing.
That's
Some
so
people like it.
isn't that so sad? Isn't that so ass backwards? Because isn't reporting supposed to be like you're supposed to see reporting as being objective, not
I,
like
yeah, I've always done this, especially in cannabis. Every Friday since 2014, I published a recap of all the news of the week, right? And it's just like everything I caught. And I often get messages like, hey, why are you covering this company? It's a scam, and this company sucks, and this other company sucks. And then, one company says that about the other company says that about the first company. It's like, dude, it's not my job to judge. You ask for unbiased journalism. You always complain about how journalism is so biased and blah, blah. This is unbiased. I'm just telling you, this happened. You judge, you make your decisions. I
right.
cannot, start a report saying like scam company triple X cannabis. Just, it's
Right. Well, they people, I guess they want to hear that subjective. Like we're so in tune now with what, because social media has kind of trained this behavior. We subscribe to what we want, what we're interested in, right? We follow who we want to hear, and we kind of just consume what makes us feel good and what reaffirms our own narrative, our own thought process. And so we've gone so far away from actually hearing, unbiased, objective news like what you're saying. And people are like, well, what's going on here? Like, why are you covering this objective news? We're supposed to side with me. And
I
it's
know.
just,
I know. I mean,
yeah,
that's what, like, we have a YouTube show at Benzinga every day at 4:30 p.m. Cannabis Insider, where we just talk about our opinions.
right.
That's not journalism. It's a YouTube show. Journalism is supposed, like, no one cares what I think. That's the whole base of it. There's an implicit bias, of course, in every journalist. When they say what to cover or what not to cover.
Right.
I try to keep it as much out of my work as possible, and that means, yeah, I got to cover this. For instance, this story you mentioned about the NFT collectible cards. I
Yeah.
did a story about this in Forbes, and Forbes Tech really liked the story, so they shared it several times in social media. And everyone was commenting like, "Hey, this is stupid. This is trash. Javier, why'd you report on this? This is idiotic." And I'm like, dude, I don't know. It's just the story, right? Like, this happened.
It happened. It's a factual thing that happened. I'm not asking you to agree with it, but it's news because NFTs are trending and this is newsworthy, right?
And literally, like, the article says nothing about it being cool or me liking it. It's like cannabis
Right.
art company Califari and private equity firm Merida Capital have formed a joint venture to create a platform that will combine blah blah blah. To do
Done.
this.
Yeah.
These are the details. This guy said this. This guy said this. You want more info? Here it is.
Right, right. Well, hey, you know what? Don't let those haters, discourage. Keep doing what you're doing, man. You're doing great work. We really appreciate all the great content that you're putting out there,
You too.
keeping us informed. It's so timely because every day people is like, "What's the new cannabis news? What's the new cannabis news?" So, Javier, I want to thank you for your time. I want to leave you with the
Yeah.
platform real quick. What do you want to leave the audience with before we go?
I mean, just, get on board with cannabis legalization. Spread the word. Be cautious not to overly overstate the benefits or understate the risks. Um, but, cannabis is love. It's awesome. Continue to listen to Cannabinoid Connect podcast. It's an awesome podcast. Check out benzinga.com/cannabis. Follow me, Javier Hasse, on social media. And if you speak Spanish, follow elplanteo.com.
El Planteo. You heard it from Javier himself. I appreciate the shout
There you
out,
go.
Javier. And
Honoring a last name with a very decent pronunciation.
hey, man, I try. I got some of that Latino blood in me. I mean, I am Latino, but Spanish is, I need to work on it. Maybe you can help me.
I
Um,
will, man. But you're good. You're representing.
hey, I appreciate it. And hey, let's run it back. I want to have you on as things evolve in the industry. I really enjoyed talking
Always.
with you. Okay.
Anytime.
Right on, Javier. Take it
Thanks for
easy,
having
man.
me.
Bye.
You too.